So today I wanted to review the next assignment and then go over a couple of announcements, class announcements. I believe I sent all of you just an update on your assignments. Again, just to for your information, not to pressure you, but now's the time to get working in earnest, especially for a few of you to just start knocking those assignments out. Um, the oh, I forgot what I was going to say regarding that. So I was planning on the end of each month. I'll just send you an update. So expect one every end of each month, just to as a reminder, and also just to be aware of what assignments I have seen on Canvas. I've graded everything that's been turned in so far. All right. So I know some of you turned in assignments the last couple of days, so I've graded everything that I've gotten from you. So I'll try to give you quick response in the grading process as well. Okay, so with that, like I said, every end of every month, I'll try to send you a reminder of what's left for you to do. And then for those of you who take note on those assignments, some of you have sermons that you're going to need to record for me and give me a link to them. Those of you that haven't preached your Revelation sermons, we'll keep that for the next module when we gather. So any Revelation sermons, Book of Revelation, you'll preach in person. But if you have Proverbs or Zechariah that you need to preach, you'll need to record those for me. We won't be able to do everything at the module 6, all the preachings. For Revelation and Second Timothy, you'll preach those sermons at module 6 in November. But the if you have I think just Proverbs was the other sermon some of you had, and some of you also had Zechariah sermons. You'll need to record those. All right, so just keep that in mind. Okay, well, let's jump into today's focus. The focus for today's topic is the next assignment in the Second Timothy uh, assignments. For the Second Timothy passage that you have, is we're still looking at this is assignment 510. This is the contextual flow of the book. And this is looking at the book as a whole. If you remember, there are two contexts in a book. When we talk about, interpreting a verse in its context, what we mean is there's two parts of that. There's the background context, and then what we would call the literary context, or we also are terming it the contextual flow. All right, and it's important. Let me just remind you quickly of the difference between those two things. The background context is the setting of the book. All right, it's the where, the when, the who, the situation, people mentioned, places mentioned, the historical context, who the author is, who the recipients are, all of that stuff. That's the background of the letter. It's kind of like the setting of the book. All right, so that's the background context. Then there's what was actually written, the literary context, which is the words that the author wrote. And he wrote those words, especially, with an epistle, but in every book, he has written down a series of thoughts, a series of ideas or points. And those thoughts or points are all connected together to form what we call a flow of thought. All right. And so every book in Scripture is united together in that book with this flow of thought that's connected to the purpose for the book. All right. And this is especially the case for epistles. Epistles, as we've said, are occasional letters, personal letters prompted by some situation or occasion that the author decides to write, wants to write, and he writes this letter. And as you go through the letter, he expresses these various points that are connected together to communicate a certain message related to the situation that caused him to write. And so the actual ideas or points are expressed. We call that the author's flow of thought, or the contextual flow, or we may call it the literary context. Okay? So those are when we say context, that's what we mean. The background context of a book and the literary context of the book, or the contextual flow. Okay? Questions on that? Okay, so keep that in mind. So the last week, our focus was the background context, digging up all the background information of the book, right? The author, the recipients, the historical context, when the letter was written, the people mentioned, the places mentioned, the culture of the people involved, and then the occasion. That is, by looking at the background context, you should be able to uncover or understand what prompted the author to write. Okay, so that's the goal of the background context. What is it that caused, in the case of 2 Timothy, what is it that prompted Paul to write to Timothy? What is there circumstances, situations? What is it that prompted Paul to do that? All right, that's what you're looking for. Now today we're going to focus attention on the next form of context, the literary context, or the contextual flow. And again, as I just said, you can picture the author's flow of thought, or the contextual flow, as a series of thoughts or points all connected together. And in epistles, each thought is connected or expressed, in a paragraph. Each paragraph represents, or by definition, is a unit of thought. And so what we want to do in this step of the contextual flow is to summarize each of those paragraphs. We want to understand, okay, paragraph 1, let's summarize it. What was the point of paragraph 1? Same paragraph 2, paragraph 3. So we go through the letter and we summarize the point of each of those paragraphs. And then as we do that, we see how each paragraph is connected together, and hopefully that shows us the overall message of the book. That's what we're after here. All right. And let me just pause for a minute and express, if you guys are interested in wanting to, some of you had mentioned wanting to sort of teach some guys, some other pastors that some of the things that we've been going over together, and that's great if you want to do that. But some of you have expressed, the block diagramming is a little bit, of a higher level. That's maybe a little bit of a challenge for some pastors who don't have any formal training. And I know for you guys, you've expressed to me at times it's and I know it's difficult. Well, one thing you can do is, before doing diagramming, that maybe you can save that for later, help them understand this process, the contextual flow. That's something that where you just summarize paragraphs. Okay, what's the point of this paragraph? What's the point of the next one? Help them be able to do that, because that's a step towards diagramming. What we're really trying to understand is, what are the author, what are the points that he's expressing in the book, and how do those points link together? And so if you can get good at summarizing the paragraphs in an epistle, that's a great start in moving towards understanding the author's flow of thought and the context of the book. And then diagramming would be the next, the more advanced step that you could do, down the road. But at least try to help them understand how to summarize paragraphs. Okay, so we're going to review that again together here, and then do an example from Philemon just as an exercise together. But I think summarizing paragraphs is a lost art. but I think it can be really a helpful tool in trying to understand, again, that flow of thought that provides a context, so that when you look at a particular verse within a paragraph, or some verses that make up a paragraph, you have an idea of what was said around it, what the author said before, what he said after, so that as you look at that particular verse or verses or paragraph, it should fit with what was said before and after, right? That's He's not going to say something completely different or random, right? One example I think we've talked about in the past, in 1 John 4, when John says perfect love casts out fear, and people take that verse and they pull it out and they just go into this, that'll preach, right? So brothers and sisters, if you have love in your heart, if there's love overflowing, then you won't be afraid of anything. Nothing will cause you to fear. You will not have anxiety. Just focus, cultivate love, right? So certainly that cultivating love's a good thing. It's important. It's a key command in the Bible. But is that what John was saying there? Well, if we take a quick look at John, 1 John 4, let me just show you, even if you take a very simple look at the paragraph that we find that verse in, let's see, it's right, John starts in chapter 4, verse 7, beloved, let us love one another. Love is of God. Everyone loves is born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, for God is love. Okay, there's a famous verse. So here we can see the topic here is love, but notice the focus. God is love. By this, the love of God was manifested in us, that he sent his only Son into the world that we might live through him. And this is love, not that we love God, but that he loved us. Okay, what's the focus so far, guys? God's love for us, right? Now, we should love. Why? Because God is love and God loved us. And he showed that love by sending his Son. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. Okay, so here's where he's going. So now he says, no one has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us. So again, the application, we need to love one another, but the focus is on God's love for us, because notice what he says next. His love is perfected in us. His love is perfected in us. All right. Verse 16, we have come to know and believe the love which God has for us. God is love. And the one who abides in love abides in God and God in him. By this love is perfected with us so that we may have confidence. By this love is perfected with us. Which love? God's love, right? So that we may have confidence in the day of judgment, because, sorry, I can't see the whole thing here. Because as he is, so also are we in the world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. There's our verse. Praise God. Let's preach it. Right? But notice, they only focus on, or sermons I've heard, they just focus on only that line. But the question we have to ask is, first, what love is he talking about? And second, what fear is he talking about? Is it just love in general? Is it our love for others? Is it our love for God? Is it God's love for others? Is it God's love? What love are we talking about here? And is this emotional love? Is this love of commitment? And then secondly, what kind of fear are we talking about here? Is this just anxiety, fear in general, or is it a specific fear? Okay, so we can understand those things by knowing what has been said around it. And again, the focus, beginning of verse 7 in this paragraph, is God's love for us. And as we love others, his love abides in us. And his love, notice, perfected with us. so that we may have confidence. Notice, in the day of judgment. There is no fear of love. Fear of what? He just talked about judgment, didn't he? And then he talks about it again. Perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment. The fear he's talking about here is the fear of judgment, the fear of God's punishment. That's the fear, not just any fear. And he says, and the one who fears is not perfected in love. That is, the one who is afraid of judgments has not experienced God's love for him. Because perfect love, God's perfect love for us, casts out fear of his judgment of us. You see that? So what John's doing here is he's trying to make this connection. Okay, the application is we should be loving one another. Okay? What is the basis for that? Why should we be loving one another? And what will be the empowering to do that? Well, God's love for us. And so his love for us is perfected in us as we abide in him. And as we express that love towards others, that's an evidence of God's love in us. And that if God does love us, his perfect love will cast out fear of judgment, because we are his children. We will not be judged. All right? So if you just read, you don't even have to do an in-depth study here. If you just read what it says and understand, okay, what has he been talking about before verse 18? And what does he talk about in verse 18? And what does he talk about after verse 18? Perfect love casts out fear should fit within that flow of thought, that discussion, right? Sakto? Okay. So this is just one example, and could have chosen many examples, but one example of just understanding the flow of thought by understanding the points being made in each paragraph will give us insight into the meaning of a particular verse or set of verses within Scripture. So all that to say is just to support the importance of understanding the contextual flow, of summarizing the paragraphs and working at these paragraph summaries, because that gives you, it won't give you all the details of every phrase, how every phrase and clause fits together, but at least you'll have a good general understanding of the points being made as you go through the book. All right. And then that will help you later when you do the diagramming as well. So any questions on that example or comments or anything we've talked about so far to this point? Anybody have anything?
It's a simple highlight, Pastor Tim. You did a very simple highlight of the contextual flow, and now I'm seeing that in that passage, the focus is uh, nothing to do with what we immediately think what love is. It's God's love, which we do not have. It's the love of God for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and that's the important thing about just reading and thinking about a little bit what's around the verse you're looking at. I mean, that's just a basic principle of interpretation, but it's one that is often neglected or forgotten or ignored. And because, we read something and we immediately sort of, like you just said, Alan, we think about it in terms of our own, experience, or what we think it is, or what sounds right. as opposed to, well, what's going on here in this text? I've heard, I've heard sermons on this, and I've heard good things said about love and how to cultivate love, and but that's not what John was focusing attention on. The application is our need to love others, but when he said perfect love casts out fear, the focus there was God's love for us, and that's the motivator to love others. Because we don't need to be afraid of being punished. We're his children, and he has shown us love. He is love. And so we should be, if we abide in him, then that love should come through us to others as well. But when he says perfect love casts out fear, he's not talking about our love for others or fear in general. He's very specific there in the context of what he's talking about. So
some pastors, Pastor Tim, are not getting the main point, no?
yeah, if you ignore everything what's said around that verse, then yeah, you're very likely going to miss the point.
And even as preachers, Pastor Tim, we tend to assume what people assume about, in particular, this topic of love. And so the flow will be going there to that direction.
That's true. That's right.
Would it be also Pastor Tim about like topical preaching or topical sermon? Would it be possible that wrong interpretation?
That's the danger or the caution in doing topical messages. You have to be careful that you don't just yank a verse out of its context. So we can teach topical messages, but you have to remember every verse that you reference, you need to understand that verse in its context. Right? So yeah, you can do a message on love, and maybe look at a few different passages, but make sure that you understand the context. Because if you do a message on love and then take this verse from 1 John and just focus on, if we have love, then we won't be afraid of anything. Well, okay, you've misinterpreted that. So topical messages to me are more difficult than just going through a text because any passage you reference, you've got to know the context. And this is also the case, brothers, if you reference another verse when you're preaching, say you're, preaching a message on 2 Timothy or on 1 John or wherever, and you're going through the passage and then you quote or you refer to another verse to support a point, make sure that the verse you quote, you're understanding it in the context of that, where that verse is, okay? So that's something to keep in mind whenever you do cross references. Make sure you understand the context of that cross reference, and that how you interpret it is consistent with the context of that verse.
These passages, Pastor Tim.
Yes.
Good morning. These passages enforces the security of our salvation, that the day of judgment is perfect love.
Yes.
Give confident.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, good application of this text.
Thanks.
Very good.
It is encouraging verse.
Yes. Yeah, God's love is perfected in us, so I don't need to fear punishment. And that's not based on me. It's because of God and who he is. That's a much more secure confidence in our salvation, because its basis is God's love for me, not my love for him or others.
Many times we failed, but God never fails in his love.
Yes.
That's why we have confidence in the day of judgment.
Yep. Exactly right.
Thank you for the passage, sir.
No, great point. Great application.
Pastor Tim, it's very common in our place when some pastors are just picking out the topic and then they're just explaining the topic without really digging on the context.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I bring this up, because just teaching, like I said, if you're helping out another pastor or teaching them maybe some of the things we've been learning, this paragraph summaries actually can be a very, very helpful thing to learn, because as you learn it, you're also learning about the context and the importance of context too. And so as guys, summarize each paragraph, then they're getting an idea of this flow of thought rather than just looking at individual verses or words or phrases. They're beginning to think more in terms of the flow of the passage, and how each verse, how each paragraph is connected together in that passage. Like the other famous passage taken out of context is, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, Matthew 18, and that's very, very often said, oh, this is prayer. So 2 people, 3 people gather together in prayer, then Christ is there with them. Now, certainly it's true when believers pray, Jesus is with them. That's a true statement. But is Matthew 18 teaching that? And if you understand that what was said before Jesus said that, if you study the context, right, he's talking about church discipline. He's talking about confronting a brother in sin and rebuking that brother. And if that brother doesn't listen, bring someone with you, and both of you confront him. And if he doesn't listen to the 2 of you, then bring it before the church and confront him. And then Jesus says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, what he meant there was, in this process of rebuking a brother in sin, it is as if I am there doing the rebuke. This is how important it is. That's what he was saying. So it's not talking about prayer at all. He's talking about confronting a brother in sin so that they would repent, so that they would, turn. And Jesus said, this is so important. When 2 or 3 are gathered in my name to confront a brother in sin, I am there with them. That's what he meant. So it elevates the importance and the significance of confronting a fellow believer in sin, that Jesus cares about this. This matters to him. So that's what he's saying. He's not saying if you 2 or 3 gather for prayer that I'm with them. Look, if one person prays, Jesus is with them. It's not like, oh, I need to get somebody to come with me to pray or Jesus won't be with me. Well, no. If you're his child, whether there's 1 or 2 or 2,000 gathered, Jesus is among his people. But that's not what Matthew 18 is talking about. And you understand that.
So to say, Pastor Tim,
sorry, go ahead.
so to say, you can still hear pastors,
Yeah,
explaining that. And up until now, I can hear some pastors and even church leaders.
yeah. I've heard some great sermons on prayer from that passage, but it had nothing to do with the passage. There's other passages where Jesus talks about prayer. You can go to Luke 18. You can go to Matthew chapter 6. Jesus talks about prayer there explicitly. Or, of course, you can go to, other passages in the epistles. But in Matthew 18, he's talking about church discipline or confronting a brother or sister in sin. So, okay. Let's get to the details here. All right, so really want to work at paragraph summaries. Those are what I want to focus on here. Now, the steps for summarizing each paragraph are basically this. First, identify the units of thought. That is, identify the paragraphs of the book. And really, the way to do that, I would suggest, is just start from the translation you use. So, for example, if we're going to look at, say, Philemon, we're going to do that as our example. Here we have the New American Standard translation, and they identify paragraphs by putting a number in bold. So verse 1 is in bold. So verses 1 to 3, because the next verse is verse 4 is in bold. So that starts the next paragraph. Verses 4 to 7, because verse 8 is in bold. Verses 8 to 16, because verse 17 is in bold. So that NAS did it a little bit more difficult. The ESV just simply did it by putting a space in here and indenting the first word of the paragraph. Do you see that? I don't know if that's easy to spot here. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, so right here, there's a space before the first word I. So this is one paragraph, verses 4 to 7. And then again, notice the indentation here at verse 8. So verses 8 to 16 is the next paragraph. Verses 17 to 20, etc. 21 to 22, then 23 to 25. Okay? That's how most, the New King James, I think, does it that way. Notice, yeah, they indent the first word, paragraph. The NIV, same thing. They indent the first word of the paragraph. So it's verses 8 to 11, 12 to 16, etc. So what you can do is just use, let's see, the Legacy Bible. They also follow the New American Standard approach just by putting a bold font on the first verse of the paragraph. Okay? But the point is that you can identify paragraphs by noting how the translation divides them up. Okay, and then as you get more experience looking at paragraphs, you may decide later to modify that a little bit based on your own study. But at least at the start, we can use the paragraphs from the translation. Then, once you've identified the paragraph or the unit of thought, summarize the point of each paragraph. And do that by first reading through the paragraph several times. Then identify the main sentence. That is the first key subject and verb. It's usually near the beginning of the paragraph. And then identify the linked words or phrases or ideas. That is, what words or statements, phrases in the paragraph have a connection. Either it's a repeated word or a synonym or perhaps a contrast. There's some connection within the paragraph between two particular words or phrases. And then put all in that information together, summarize the paragraph in a sentence in your own words. And I say 10 to 20 words as a target. So let's do this for in Philemon, just as an example. I'll do the first paragraph with you, and then I'll have you guys take a little time and summarize another paragraph together, okay? So for Philemon, first we want to, okay, if we're going to study Philemon, we want to, okay, what are the units of thought? Again, remember, Philemon is just one chapter in the text. And so the New American Standard, this is how they divide it up. The ESV, this is how the paragraphs are divided. Notice, very similar, by the way. In fact, it's exactly the same until the last paragraph. The New American Standard splits it up a little bit. The ESV just keeps it together. The LSB is the same as New American Standard. The New King James, the NIV, and so you can see the comparison. But the NAS, the ESV, the LSB, and the New King James are all pretty close. Okay, and so I'm going to just use the New American Standard. That's the translation I typically go from, so we'll use that as our basis. Now, having identified each of the paragraphs, summarize the main point in this fashion, as I mentioned. So we'll read through the paragraph several times, identify the main sentence. Now, I'm going to skip the introduction because there's no real main sentence. There's no verb, right? Because it's just an introduction. It's the author to the recipients. So it's really the main sentence is Paul to Philemon, as I've highlighted. The linked words are just our and your, grace and peace. So I just said the summary, Paul extends grace and peace to Philemon and the church. That'll be a typical introduction summary for most letters, not all. Some of them, like Romans, for example, will have extra, or Galatians will have some other things that you need to consider. But for Philemon, it's a basic greeting. The author, the recipient, and the expression of peace. All right. Now, let's look at verses 4 to 7 together. And we'll read it together, and then I'll walk you through how I would summarize this. And then you guys will do the next paragraph on your own. So let me ask Tazo, if you could read verses 4 to 7 here. This is Philemon.
Philemon 4 to 7. I thank my God always when I remember you in my prayers, because I hear of your love and of the faith that you have toward the Lord Jesus and for all the saints. And I pray that the sharing of your faith may become effective for the full knowledge of every good thing that is in us for the sake of Christ. For I have derived much joy and comfort from your love, my brother, because the hearts of the saints have been refreshed through you.
Okay. So the first thing we want to do is, and normally you'd read through this a few more times to get more familiar with it, is first identify, what's the main sentence? Okay. I thank my God. All right. That's the subject I, the verb thank, my God. That's how he begins the paragraph. Now he adds always when I remember you in my prayers. Those are modifiers. The main sentence is really I thank my God. So I would note that here. All right. I thank my God. It's the main sentence. That tells us right off. This is an expression of gratitude from Paul. Then I would go through the paragraph and just note any words or phrases that are linked together. Let's see. Yeah, let's do that here. Okay. So prayers, I see that in verses 4, right? Verse 4 here. Oops. Sorry about that. Actually, let's do this. Way. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so notice we have prayers. We have pray. Mentioned a couple of times here. Joy and comfort. He says in verse 7, joy. Mentioned here, comfort. Now, those aren't synonyms. Those aren't the same word, but they express a similar or connected idea, right? Love, faith, sharing. Verse 5, 6. So he mentions here love, faith, sharing. Okay, these are all sort of connected, linked together in some ways. And then I had I, my, you, and your that he mentioned. Okay. And there may be some other things you see, but this is just a basic idea. So as I think about, okay, what are some possible summaries I could, taking the main sentence and these linked word and phrases and kind of putting them together. I could say Paul's commendations to Philemon. All right. That's fine, but that's not much detail. That's too general. Okay. Be more specific. So I could say Paul's thankful prayer for Philemon because of his faith in Christ and love for the saints. Okay. Notice I have the idea of thankful, of prayer, faith, and love. So I've kind of incorporated those. Or Paul's praising God for Philemon. Maybe we could say Philemon's love and faith toward the saints. Or Paul's thankful prayer that Philemon's faith would be effective. So these are some different ideas, and I went with, as I summarized that, I did that last one. I thought it was a good summary because it includes thankfulness, prayer, Philemon's faith, and then also this idea of sharing, or that his faith would be effective through or because of Philemon's testimony. Okay, so notice it contains the content of Paul's prayer, not just that he prayed, but also what he prayed. But notice it's only, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 13 words. All right. So like I said, 10 to 20 words is about the target that you want to give. Okay. So that's the basic idea here. Now, what I'd like you guys to do is take the next paragraph, verses 8 to 16. It's a little bit bigger. So I'm going to give you some time to, now why did that? Okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to work through this paragraph on your own. Identify the main sentence. All right. And notice, by the way, he says, accordingly, though I am bold enough in Christ. So notice that word though. This is not the main sentence. It's a little bit, I'll just give you a hint. Verse 9 and 10, it's repeated, the main sentence. And then just look for words or phrases or ideas that are connected or linked together in the paragraph, okay? So try to do that on your own. I'll give you a few minutes, then we'll come together and discuss, all right? Are there any questions? Okay, why don't you go ahead together? Okay. All right, what do we get for the main sentence here? Anybody?
I appeal to you.
I appeal to you. Yeah, I
Verse
think
10.
you're right. Verse 10. Even he says, I prefer to appeal to you. Verse 9. That's the main sentence. So what he says before that, all of this is supporting or modifying that idea. Okay, very good. Here, let me do this. I think this will be better. All right. Let me put the passage to the right there on the screen, and then, okay. Now, what about linked words or phrases? Anybody have any that they found?
Appeal.
Okay, yes. Appeal. Verse, actually, I'm going to do this. All right, there, good. This will be easier. Do it this way. Okay, appeal. That's in the main. Man, I see it in verses 9 and 10.
9 and 10.
Okay, good. What else?
Command.
Command?
So I
Okay.
think it's connected to appeal.
Yeah, really, rather than command, he says, I prefer to appeal to you. All right. Anything else?
Then sending,
Sending. Okay. Where do you see that?
verse 12.
Verse 12.
Connection to- yeah.
You see anywhere else that it's linked to? Verse 12, he says it twice, right?
Sending him back, sending my very heart.
Yeah, maybe have him back. Kind of a connected idea, right? All right. Good. Others?
Imprisonment,
Okay.
verse 10.
Verse 10. There it is. And verse 13. Now that word command, I think I might actually put it, I noticed, notice he says compulsion in verse 14. I think I would sort of link that to command. Those are probably a little bit closer idea. And even consent.
Consent.
He mentions free will, I think. Or maybe that's the idea of consent. Verse 8, command, yeah, 14. So I don't know. That those seem to be mean to be. Anything else?
One servant,
Separated.
Okay, separated. Where is that?
Have him back. Or sending.
Okay, what verse?
Verse
I don't-
15.
16? Separated?
15.
Oh, 15. Oh, that. Oh, I
Separated
see.
from
He
you.
was parted. Running out of colors here. You mean parted and have him back?
I'm looking at my translation.
Oh,
Of
okay.
your-
And it was
of-
separated. It says
Of
separated.
your own accord, Pastor Tim. Of your own accord, verse 14.
Okay.
Connected to compulsion, consent.
Okay. Good. By the way, we have prisoner as well. Imprisonment and prisoner. How about verse 11? I see a contrast there that we might want to include. You guys see it?
Useless, useful.
Yeah. Useless. And useful. Okay. That's a good captured a lot of the connections there. Anybody want to present how they might have summarized the paragraph here?
I appeal to you concerning my son, who's useful now is useless now is useful.
Okay. useful. Okay, so good. You have the main sentence there. I appeal to you. We have the useful, useless. How about any of these other things, connections we saw? Any way maybe to add a little bit to this or modify it a little bit?
Not in compulsion, but in your free will. Continuation.
Yeah, maybe we could say something like Paul appeals to Philemon to willingly receive Onesimus back. How about that? That idea of willingly, right? Of your own accord, not under compulsion, your consent. You could even say willingly receive a useful, if you wanted, Onesimus back, right?
Another
Okay.
another connection, Pastor Tim, not as a bond servant, but a beloved brother.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I think that's good.
Link words.
Yeah, we didn't include that, did we? But we should have. Bond servant and brother, right? He mentions in
16.
16, bond servant, beloved brother.
11.
Good. I like that. Something like this. I think that's a good one. Would you guys, how many words do we have here? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 words. So that fits in our 10 to 20. Any other thoughts on this? What do you guys think about this one? Does that capture, you think? There's more you could put in, but again, there's a point that you want to capture the main idea as best you can, because if you start putting more and more stuff in, you begin to really just repeat the whole paragraph. So you're trying to narrow it down to the key idea that seems to be there. Okay, now some of you may add or take away, something here to modify it in your own words a little bit, but this I think does capture, definitely you want Paul appeals to Philemon. Okay, that's the main sentence, and that's repeated, that's a focus. And then I think this idea of receiving Onesimus is important, right? That needs to be in there. And then I think the idea of willingly, not as a slave, as a brother, useful, that incorporates a lot of the linked words that we saw. Make sense? Okay, so that's the idea. Now, we won't do all the paragraphs, but I've got here the other ones. If you were to go through and summarize, again, the same approach, identify main sentence, linked words and phrases. And then what I did was I combined the last two paragraphs. They seem to all connect together to one. And doing that, I end up with the following summary. All right, these are my paragraph summaries for each of the paragraphs in the letter. And again, I combined the last two into one because I thought it went together. Okay, so these are, if we go back to our, where is it at? This here, right? These are our paragraph. Each paragraph represents a point. Well, this is what we have for, Philemon. We've got 5 paragraphs. These represent the point of them. And notice again, we're not just summarizing this like to be an outline. These aren't just general summaries. An outline would look like this. Okay, this would be an outline. Paul's greeting, Paul's prayer, Paul's request, Paul's second appeal, Paul's conclusion. Okay, that's an outline. That just gives you a general idea of the topic. But that's not what we're doing here. We want more detail, right? What is Paul's greeting? What is Paul's prayer? What is his request or appeal? Okay, that's what we're after. We're after the point of the paragraph, not just the topic. You follow me? So we don't want to have a summary that just says Paul's prayer for Philemon. Okay, that may be the topic of the paragraph, verses 4 to 7, but that's not helpful. What did he pray? Why did he pray? Okay. Again, verse 8 to 16, you could have just said Paul's appeal to Philemon. Okay, well, that certainly captures the topic of the paragraph, but it doesn't capture the point of the paragraph. All right. So this is what we're after. The contextual flow, the point of each paragraph, not just the topic. Okay, we want the point of each paragraph, not just the topic. That's the goal of the paragraph summary. So now we have at least an idea of the flow of thought of this particular letter. Okay? And we just went through these two together, but you get the idea. So with that, once we have this contextual flow, then the next thing is from that, hopefully, we can derive the purpose of the book. Now, sometimes the purpose is mentioned explicitly, but sometimes it's not. And again, remember, the purpose of the book is really the point the author is making. All right, the purpose is not the same as the occasion. The occasion of the book is the particular event or problem or issue that motivated the author to write, the circumstances that prompted him to write. The purpose of the book is the main theme or message the author wanted to give in response to that circumstance or in light of the occasion. Okay, and it is the background context that gives us the occasion, okay, and the contextual flow that gives us the purpose. All right, so that's the distinction. The background context helps us understand, okay, what prompted the author to write. The purpose of the book is, what did he write? What was that message that he wanted to give to his hearers? And so, for example, in Philemon, the occasion of the letter, Onesimus was a slave who ran away from his owner, Philemon, came to Christ when he met Paul in prison, and Paul sent Onesimus back to Philemon. And the purpose of Philemon is to ask Philemon to appeal to him to receive Onesimus back as a slave, not as a brother, in order to encourage Christian unity and fellowship in the church. Okay? That's the idea. So hopefully, once you've gone through this process of the background, context, and the contextual flow, that you'll be able to know the book well enough to determine what is the occasion, that is, what prompted the author to write, and then what is the purpose of the book? That is, what is the message the author was giving to address that circumstance that caused him to write? Okay? Questions on that? Okay, let me show you. Let me pull up the assignment 510 here. Okay. Contextual flow, 2 Timothy. It's right here. Okay, so this is the assignment that's on Canvas that when you can download it from there. Again, it's following the same format. These are the instructions for the contextual flow of 2 Timothy. So I just give you the instructions. Then give you an example, and I'm just the example that we did for Philemon. Identify units of thought. I think this should be NAS that we use here. Oh no, I guess I did the ESV in this case. I followed the ESV translation for the assignment, but it's going to be the same idea here. And these are just the paragraph summaries from that. Again, this is just for the example, and then put the summary of each paragraph together. All right, and that's what you would need to do for 2 Timothy. So I put here for 2 Timothy, I put the LSB paragraph divisions. I encourage you then to do that for these other translations. Okay, look them up, identify the paragraph divisions. And now in this case, Philemon was 1 chapter. 2 Timothy is 4 chapters. All right, don't just do 1 chapter. You have to do the book. Okay. In the past, some guys just did 1 chapter. No. You have to the flow of the whole book, not just 1 chapter. Philemon, the whole book is 1 chapter. That's why the example only does 1 chapter, but you need to do the whole book. So you can follow the LSB example. I think that would be good to do as far as the divisions, but you can look up the other ones and then read through the paragraph several times. So then put the verse numbers here for the paragraph. I just gave you an example. You'll need to add more to this, okay? But so just do exactly like was done for Philemon, all right? Where we have the verse numbers, then the main sentence, the linked words, and the summary. Just do that for each paragraph in the whole letter to 2 Timothy. So you're going to have at least something like 4, 8, 12, 16 to 18 paragraphs in 2 Timothy to do. Now, the first one will be easy, and the last one will be easy, because that's just introduction and conclusion. But the rest of them, you'll need to do just like we did in the example this morning. All right? So do that for 2 Timothy. Do these steps, read each paragraph several times, identify the main sentence, identify the linked words, summarize the paragraph in your own words. So I just put an example format here. You can do this on your own. All right? Questions on that? Okay. All right, good. One other thing I want to go over with you guys before we break for this morning is, let me pull up Canvas here for a moment. Okay. All right. Or hopefully you can see this. Can everyone see I've got Canvas open here? Everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So yeah, again, you guys can pull the assignments from a couple of places. One is just go to assignments. Okay, oops, pull that over here. All right. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, here we go. So here's the assignments just listed explicitly. I don't know why it says they're all overdue. Let me check. I must have the wrong due dates here. Well, I'll fix that. Okay, so you can get the assignments here, or I'm also putting them. Here's the big link here, right? It's all the course files. So you can also get them each week. I just put the assignment. What's going on here? Oh, duh. This is why. Sorry, guys. I had the wrong one open here. Let me try this again. Okay. Let's try this again. So now I know why it said the assignments were overdue. All right, this is your the upcoming assignments. So notice you got reading. So assignment 510 is the contextual flow of 2 Timothy. So you guys know how to do this. Start the assignment. So you can get it here, or you can go to the big link that I have right in the middle of the page here. And on this link, I'm also putting, for each session, I'll put the class notes in the video, but also I'm putting the assignment that we went over on that session. Okay, so you can get the assignment here as well. Okay, so for example, I will put, oh, I already did, I think. Let me see if it's there. Yeah. So here's contextual flow for 2 Timothy. So you can get the assignment here as well. Okay. And I'll put the notes in the video here. So I have the notes for the session here, and then the video of the session, and then I also put the assignment for your convenience. All right. So that's one thing I want to just remind you of. The second thing is I mentioned to you guys on Facebook that I mentioned here the Preaching That Changes Lives, that Pastor Mike Fabarez gave us permission to have the book for free if you are a student of TEA. And I actually changed something on this that I wanted to make you aware of, and that is this. I made another assignment. Assignment 516. It's an agreement, and I want to just show you this because just for the sake of our integrity, so you can go to this assignment and just download a document that's an agreement not to distribute the book. All right, this is just for your personal use, guys. And I trust you, but I also want to make sure there's accountability here, because
Yes, Pastor Tim.
the author's giving us this book for free as a blessing, as a ministry to us. And so we want to honor that his expression of kindness. We want to honor that by agreeing not to give this book to anyone else. And so what I'm asking you guys to do, this is an assignment. I listed it as an assignment. You're not being graded for it, but I would like for you to fill it out by, you can check these boxes and sign the document, or you can just type your name here in the document and then upload it back into Canvas. Okay, so if you could just fill this out, and all it's saying is I agree, I'm not gonna make copies and hand it out or sell or forward or post or change it at all. This is for your personal use. Okay, so please please download this form and sign, fill it out and then upload it, just as an expression of commitment and accountability to honor the author in his generosity to give us his book. And what I also did is, notice in the assignment, I put the password. The PDF file is password protected. So I put the password also in the assignment. Okay, so you can download the book here. And then there's the password to open the book. And then what I'd like you to do, though, is to fill out the agreement form that you won't forward or copy or give away this book. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. If you could please take care of that. You can download the book and you've got the password. Just please download the agreement and fill it out and then upload it back on the Canvas. Okay. And that would be great. We want to, I think this will also encourage other authors too, if they, as we request from them to have books made available, we can let them know this is what we have the students fill out. There's a commitment that they make not to give away your book and to respect your gift. So just wanted to make you aware of that. Okay. Any questions about that, guys? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Great. Okay. Any other questions, comments before we end our time today? Next week, Lord willing, we'll jump into the connector word diagramming assignments, go through some examples from 2 Timothy. So I'll try to help you a little bit with those assignments for the next few weeks, just so that I can get you started on that assignment, because that's a big one, bigger one for this module. Any questions or comments, guys, before we end our time today? Okay. Well, I hope that was a helpful review for you. Thanks for making the time. Oh, I did have one other thing I forgot to mention. So I talked with Pastor Marvin late last week, and he has his family circumstances right now are really preventing him from doing any overseas travel. He needs to take care of some family things, so he's not going to be able to come in November, unfortunately. He wanted to express his regrets about that, but he did agree to in September and October, I'm going to be traveling a lot. He did agree to do a discipleship lab with us, focusing more on Christ's method of training and discipleship. And he's got a study on that that I thought would be really beneficial for you guys. So he's agreed to, during the September and October, to take over this time that we have together to do that. He did something like that before, if you'll remember, during COVID. I thought it was really good. So he said he can't make it work for November. So Pastor Devraj will be doing our graduation. He agreed to do that, to do the ceremony for us. And then Pastor Marvin will be working with us in September, October. Okay. So we'll be together, Lord willing. You're stuck with me, at least pretty much in through August. And then there'll be a break there in July when I'm in the Philippines. But you have me for the most of the time between now and then September. He'll take over. Okay. All right.